Today's signing by President Trump of an executive order on international religious freedom advances his previous call for other countries to end religious persecution, integrating that call into U.S. foreign policy. U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, joins me now from the White House to talk more about today's executive order. Ambassador, welcome back to the show, and thank you for your time.
Hey, happy to join you, Tracy, and excited about this executive order that the president signed. I think it can be really useful in this push for international religious freedom.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your time today and talking about it. Today's action budgets at least $50 million per year for programs that advance international religious freedom. Can you talk a little bit more about those programs and exactly how they will support this very important cause?
You know, if the $50 million is an increase from what we currently are we're using on this, but the real crux of the program that he's done is that he's now within the next 180 days, there has to be a plan developed about how to integrate international religious freedom into all the parts and the tentacles of State Department, USAID. And so what you're really seeing taking place now is religious freedom, international religious freedom, going into all the various aspects of foreign policy, of statecraft. So that's a fabulous move. The increase in the funding will be helpful, I think, in programming. And the programming is in a lot of different areas. A lot of times it's targeted where we've got a particular religious freedom problem and a nation that's willing to address it. Often you have religious freedom issues and the country's not willing to address it. And there really the money is not of much use to you. You're really looking more at a sanctions type issue in that situation.
Well, Ambassador, back in 2019, President Trump made history as the first American president to convene a meeting of global leaders at the United Nations General Assembly in order to address international religious freedom. How does today's order help the U.S. to support countries that are doing the right thing and also address those who aren't?
Well, this builds on what the president did at the UN General Assembly, which really was groundbreaking. I mean, nobody else had ever done that. The UN Secretary General was there, made a good, strong, positive statement. And for years, the issue of religious freedom has kind of been a backwater type of issue, unfortunately. And because of that, then you've seen this level of persecution grow around the world. You've seen 80% of the world's population live in a religiously restricted atmosphere. So the president's really put his mark on this one and say this is a foundational human right. We're going to push on it. And today's executive order builds on that. This is the first time we've ever had an executive order on international religious freedom. And it's the first time we've really had a mandate and had it from the president to now bleed this issue into all the aspects of statecraft and to do it as a whole of government approach. So it's also going to be in our development aid programs too and other programs across the U.S. government that have a foreign reach to them. So this is a big issue, and it really builds on what the president did at the UN.
Yeah, and I also understand that today's action also mandates that more federal employees who work abroad undergo training on international religious freedom. Can you talk about that and the significance of that? And do you think this was important to include?
Well, I think it's very important to include. And the reason I think it's very important to include is that when we have people assigned overseas, they've got a whole array of topics that they're representing the United States government on. But what this says is now we want you to be particularly trained in these religious freedom issues because they're of importance to us on a basic building block of human rights. And so this training, I think, will then put more front of mind nature for our people that are representing us overseas to be able to see things, to be able to say, okay, this is an issue, we need to be addressing it more. This is, again, one of those things where, you know, as you know more, you learn more, you see more. And that's what I think this training will be beneficial for.
Well, Ambassador, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. I'm wondering if you can talk about how the lockdowns due to the pandemic, maybe how they have restricted religious freedom.
We've seen two things, and they've been in opposite trends. One, we have seen the release of a number of religious prisoners around the world, and that's a good thing, and it needs to continue. In the bad category, what we've seen is a persecution of people, of religious minorities in a number of countries, where in cases they haven't been able to get the humanitarian aid or the health care that they need during the pandemic. And we've been pushing a lot of the countries around the world saying, you know, please treat them as equal citizens, not better, not worse than anybody else. So we have seen a lot of reaction, really, to the coronavirus that has had direct impact on the religious minority communities. We're stepping up more in our alliance efforts with other nations, 29 other nations, on religious freedom, and that's worked during the pandemic. But we've got a long ways to go for religious freedom.
Absolutely. Well, Ambassador, thank you so much for your time and all that you do. We appreciate you taking time out to speak with us today. U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.